Hello everyone, and thanks for coming back to the channel. Today we're taking a look at the Gielan Hobby Hollywood CineWhoop, otherwise known as the X-UFO 85X 4K, featuring 1204 5000 kV motors, what I believe are Emax Avon 2-inch props, Cadix Tarsier 4K camera, the Supra F4 all-in-one flight controller ESC, which features a Maytech F411 processor, 12 amp 4-in-1 ESC, and a 2 amp back, and a power switchable VTX from 25 milliwatt to 200 milliwatt via smart audio. Comes with an XT30 for your battery connection, a 260 milliamp 4S battery. Stock it comes with this thing for your battery strap. I just used a rubber band. It comes with kind of a pink or purple battery strap as well, an extra set of red props, an ND filter, an extra foam pad for the bottom where your battery goes, camera control board, a screwdriver, and an Allen key. It comes with binding instructions, as well as some basic setup instructions. This part right here talks about the VTX. It also comes with this one pager on the X-Boss receiver, otherwise known as the AC900, which is Futaba, FrSky D16, and non-EU compatible. It's actually pretty easy to set up. It also comes with this USB cable with an extra long nose. The normal USB cable on the left is well shorter than the one that comes with the quad. You need this extra long end so you can reach your USB port, just like that. And it all comes in this form-fitting case with a handle. It weighs almost 83 grams. With the stock 260 milliamp 4S battery, it weighs 114.5 grams. I also flew it on the Beta FPV and GNB 450 milliamp 4S batteries. With the GNB 450, it weighs 136.35 grams. With the Beta FPV battery, it weighs 134.25 grams. I'm getting just over 84 millimeters motor post to motor post. As you can see there on the ground, we've got quite a bit of wind. You can see the top of that tree kind of moving around, and we're going to do the cruising flight first. That's why we're out front, because it really feels like that's the primary duty for this. You're looking at this as kind of a filming quad, one that you can get possibly close to people, or that's going to have protected propellers for whatever purpose, whether that's to be around people, pets, or just being able to bump off of stuff and still continue to fly, which this hoop form does do fairly well. I am flying in acro mode. I am not flying in a stabilized mode, and this gives us an idea of the image quality that you get. Now, this image quality that you're getting right now that you're seeing is 1080p 60 frames per second. My computer has a very difficult time editing 4K footage, so in the video description down below, I have got a 4K sample of this same day flying it around with the same sort of batteries, and that gives you the 4K sample. And the 4K records at 30 frames per second, so that's something else to note if you're not familiar with the Cadix Tarsier. There's a host of other recording options, and you can toy with those if you were to have one to select the best video quality for what you're looking to do. One of the things that I was fairly surprised at, and we'll take a closer look back at the desk, is the stabilized footage. Now, in the past, I have flown the Eachine Whoop, which I was pretty impressed with its 4K footage, or its stabilized footage. It's another Cadix Tarsier, and the Beta FPV HD products also had pretty good stabilized footage. But correct me if I'm wrong, I think I see less jitter. If we ignore the winds kind of pushing me around and causing some vibrations every once in a while, you should be able to tell as we watch this the wind effect versus just if you have a zero wind condition, which I pretty much never have, and how stable the footage is where you don't get any of that jello or the wavy lines in your footage. Typically when I'm looking for that, I look in the distance, because that tends to show me that sort of imperfection in the video quality the most. But I was pretty impressed with what I saw in this, but again, I'm looking for your feedback on that as well. Now again, this is an 85 millimeter format in a hoop, so you're going to get better footage from a larger platform and unprop guarded quads, but for this form factor, I was pretty impressed, and I think that its primary duty of being able to cruise around, you probably want to do something more stable than I am, and getting a scenic shot or flying through a playground with maybe some staged people or skateboarders or mountain bikers or what have you, that it would do this job pretty well. Actually, I think it does it better than the CineWhoop, but the CineWhoop, I think it does it better than the Eachine version, but this one is quite a bit more expensive. I think you're also going to get longer flight times out of this one as well. I did this flight first just to make sure I didn't beat it up too much before we took a look at the stabilized footage, because again, that is probably its primary function in your hands. The flight that we're looking at, this slow kind of cruising flight looking at footage, is going to come in at about 3 minutes and 20 seconds, and we're getting ready to wrap that up here shortly. I was fairly impressed with the range on the receiver, because this is a receiver I haven't done a whole lot with, and I haven't flown it out front. The King Kongs also have these on it, and I think you'll run out of video feed before you run out of control link. But that wraps up the flight. Let's go and take a look at the racing footage that I did attempt in the backyard. So you can see there again, we still have wind. It's blowing those leaves and those branches around a little bit, so it's not going to be real stabilized. But this is just kind of a personal challenge, and also it feeds any sort of need that you might have to see how aggressively at least I can fly it. Now this again is on the same batteries, and it's more of a racing style. You can do some mild acrobatics with it, and I display a few things when it comes to the mild acrobatics in this video. Doing short punch outs and stuff like that. I also covered dives, but I'm going to do that in a picture-in-picture window back at the desk. The short story on the dives, one of the things that we tend to look for is, does it yaw washouts, where the nose pitches up and then it yaws around uncontrollably for just a brief moment, and then you regain control. This does do it, and it also doesn't do it. So it's going to depend upon your dive. There is a possibility that can be tuned out, but that's going to take a fair bit effort, and I would be concerned that if we tune that out, that we might start to get some jello in the footage. You know, if you get this tuned too tightly or over-tuned, you may start to see some imperfections in the footage, or more imperfections in the footage, depending upon your view. Now, this backyard scene is not great for these HD or 4K recordings, because we have a huge variable in lighting. We have some soft lighting, we have some bright lighting, we have some dark spots, and I'm kind of flying through them all constantly, and sometimes in camera, you'll see all three of those combined. So if you don't find this footage appealing, it's probably because the environment, the more even your lighting is, the more likely you'll get the footage that you're looking for. So when you have kind of rough lighting like this, not so great. But it was not an easy task to fly this way. It does not have great acrobatic abilities. It's not a racing machine by any stretch, and I don't think that's the purpose. And the flight time we're going to get is just about 2 minutes on a 450 milliamp 4S battery. I flew this out back quite a bit, and it was, like I said, in that sort of racing style or more aggressive flight footage. It was a challenge. It's not really acrobatic. And before I started doing the review, I'd kind of looked the machine over, and everything looked fine. You can see my propellers have got all sorts of grass that cut in them. You could probably find grass down inside here as well. But unfortunately, I did find where I did break it. If you look closely right down here, we've got a little breakage, and I did not notice that through the flights. This little spur down here is also broken, so it snapped right there. If you have really any of these machines right now, I would repair them with E6000 or welder adhesive, and I can link those down in the video description. I get mine from Amazon, and it takes a long time for the welder to set up, but welder stays flexible, and I think it tends to hold a little bit better than E6000, but use what you prefer. So we did end up with a breakage, which kind of isn't surprising because it's not light. You throw on a 4S battery on there, and then I was banging it all over the trees and the swing set because it was difficult to fly aggressively. And I wanted to show you that just so if somebody comes along and wants to know that information, they at least get some sample of this in my hands. But something that they did that is different, at least in my opinion, is they have rubber mounting down here, and I'm wondering if that helped stabilize some of the footage. I don't know how much that did, but I did notice it, and I haven't seen this on others. So that's an extra step they took, and it seems like they took several extra steps. Look how neat and tidy all the wires are through here. Everything's tucked away real nicely. You shouldn't have to worry too much about catching a wire, but also notice that we have another odd motor pattern for our motors. It's not anything standard that I've seen. So if you're looking at this frame or looking at these motors, that's something to take note. It's a 3-hole pattern, and it's got a variable distance in there that I just haven't seen before. But they did a really nice job of keeping everything tidy. Also, if we look at the wires, you can see a zip tie down in there, right down in here, keeping all the wires together and keeping them out of harm's way. We've seen with other machines where your wires might get into harm's way, and then, you know, you clip one of those things and it's lights out probably for your camera or some component. Also, right down here, that is a buzzer. That is a micro buzzer, and it is fairly loud. You can pick that up on the microphone on the camera. And speaking of the microphone, for those of you that aren't familiar with it, this microphone does operate a little bit differently. It is a little bit higher quality, but unfortunately in micros it still sounds terrible. You get a lot of wind noise over the top. So if you're thinking of using audio, you need to plan to take some extra steps for at least muting that wind noise that blows over the top, as well as micro motors just don't sound that good. But we'll take a little listen here. If you don't like the sound of it, please cover your ears or turn your mute on. I'll give my thumb up when we're back to normal audio after we get done listening to this little sample. Okay, that's quite enough. I don't think too many people would be trying to use that audio. You probably use a sampling of other audio that you download from the internet to create some sort of cinematic footage. But if you haven't heard that before, I think it's always useful for me to include a little bit so you don't get confused by what you have if you end up buying. Also, the VTX is right up here, and we have some LEDs right through here, which are kind of neat. It kind of gives it that bug feeling to this back or the shell, which we've seen this sort of style before, but we haven't seen this precise style either. Also, the VTX antenna is secured. We have this little bit of PCB they've screwed into these two rear standoffs that keeps our antenna in place. I've seen others where there just kind of was a plastic clip that they built in where the antenna didn't necessarily hold very well. So that should keep your antenna from moving around too much outside of that secured area, and it should help with making sure that your VTX is down. We have this little crack in the wings, so to speak, in the top of the canopy to where you can make sure that your VTX is firmly seated with the UFL connector. As you can see from the sides, our USB port for the CADX camera as well as our SD card is easily available. They also routed the camera control connector down through here, so that's easily available. You can see down through that shot as well how it's secured up in there with screws. It is firmly mounted up here, so you shouldn't have to worry about that stuff moving around. And of course, this is our zip tie that's securing the wires that run all through this machine, keeping that stuff out of harm's way. Something that you may have noticed and I forgot to mention so far is not only all of these motors have an odd mounting pattern, it seems that even on this quad it kind of comes, the motor wires kind of come off the side a little bit, so that's a little bit of a quirk. Maybe they designed it that way for some purpose that I can't identify in the moment. The receiver's right underneath this board, and it's the AC900 receiver. It's a single antenna receiver. It's relatively easy to initially bind this thing up. You do have to take this bottom plate off, and then you press a button on the receiver in order to get it in the mode you need it to bind it, where it's either Futaba or FR Sky. So it's kind of a dual or multi-mode receiver, which is fairly interesting, and it's fairly small. And speaking of that receiver, it's got a little hole down here. I don't know if it's coming through in camera very well, but that is actually poked through a hole that's not seated down through something. So that should definitely keep the control link antenna out of harm's way. They've done a number of things to make sure this thing stays intact, but unfortunately I still found a way or managed to break it. But it still flies fine. I didn't notice that breakage until I sat down to do the review. Also, that little bit, I think that is carbon right underneath the motor that they use to mount the motors down to the frame. Or actually, it's just something that the screws go through. I don't know what purpose that would serve other than to just give you more surface area that the motor wouldn't be working against all the little spots where the screws are. Rather, it would work over one big spot. That could be an advantage. It's just something different again that I noticed. The battery strap that it came with, I took that off right away. It is somewhat pliable. I just couldn't manage it with my fingers. I had to use a needle nose to pull it off of there. If your fingers are different than mine, you might be able to manage it. I just went to a rubber band that I had in my bin. This is a foam pad here. I didn't have any problems with batteries ejecting or anything, probably because this is a good, pretty strong little rubber band. I don't know where I got this. It just came out of some kit. Random rubber band that I had in the bin, so I decided to use that, and I found that much more manageable. If you were to lose the USB connector that's extra long, that nose that's pretty unique, you're not in bad shape because you can just take these 4 screws out and you have plain access to the USB port. Actually, I set it up without ever using that cable. Again, something I didn't notice until I sat down to do the review is how long the nose of the included USB cable is. That thing is, I've never seen anything like that. And somebody should sell that. I can see where that would be useful. I have 2 or 3 other quads that would be useful to have. So if you know of where you can buy one of those USB cables with an extra long nose, I'm up for buying one because it would come in handy in a few different builds that I currently have laying around. I'll put the PIDs on screen that it came with as well so that you get an idea of what those are. I don't suggest, unless you have a build just like this with motors just like this, running props just like this, coming in at this weight, that you try those PIDs. But if you have this and then you end up flashing Betaflight, or Betaflight has a problem where it loses the PIDs, those PIDs are on screen for you to copy back in. I've been getting asked a lot recently about PIDs. PIDs are helpful to help control the machine, but it is not going to make you a better pilot. Practice will make you a better pilot. And practice is fun, so enjoy it. So overall, my experience with this is pretty good. I think its primary purpose, as I've said a couple of times previously in the video, is to get some high definition or 4K footage of more cruising or smooth flight through an interesting scene of some sort. But you can fly it a little bit more aggressively, as I've shown in this video, if you choose to. The price point comes in around the $200 marker. I'll have a link down in the video description if you want to go check it out yourself. Maybe it goes on sale. Like right now on Geek Buying, it's saying it's 2% off. Maybe that 2% becomes 20% at some point, and it becomes more viable for your bank account, or it's just something that you're keeping your eye on, and you're waiting for it to go on sale. That link down there in the video description will take you right to the product page. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions, or otherwise, please let me know in the section down below. I appreciate your time, and thanks for watching.